Bleacher Report released their predictions for the top 100 players in the NBA next season. Where did Cade Cunningham rank? Did any of his teammates join him on this list? We're going to talk about that in today's episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Johnson with 1 second to go.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I am your host, Kuka Hill. You can find me over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. And if you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 back in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Later on in the podcast, we'll talk about a few of Cade's teammates that did not make the top 100, what they need to do to become a top 100 player. And then even later in the podcast, we'll talk about, is it shocking that Hamidou Diallo is still not signed, not just by the Pistons, but by any NBA team? We'll talk about that a little bit later on. But let's get to where Cade was ranked on this Bleacher Report top 100. Now, if I'm understanding this list correctly, which I 100% believe I am, this was their prediction for how next season will play out. Not going into next season, the top 100 players, but predicting after what happens next season, who will be the top 100 players. So, Cade made the top 40. He is ranked number 39, top 40 player in the entire NBA. Some names that they have him ahead of. They got him ahead of Zach LaVine. They have him ahead of Kristaps Porzingis, DeMar DeRozan, Evan Mobley, Paolo Banchero. And they have him right behind Drew Holiday. They have him right behind Darius Garland. I believe he's the highest ranked player on this list from his class. I believe Evan Mobley would be the highest, if not Cade. And since he's behind, or since Evan Mobley's behind Cade, I'm going to assume that Cade's the highest ranked player from his class. Another notable guy from his class that was ranked on here, Jalen Green, is at number 80. So, yeah, Cade makes the top 40 on these predictions. So, what's my takeaway from this? First off, the hype around Cade just continues to build up. I saw some people from different fan bases tweeting out, I don't want to hear Pistons fans talk about Cade being underrated or no one talking about Cade again. And that was something that Pistons fans in the Pistons community had said for a while. But I don't think they might be right. Don't think you can say that anymore. I mean, Cade's getting a ton of love this offseason. And after a season where he didn't even play, I mean, he played 10 games, 10, 11 games, but really didn't even get to play. Bleacher Report is moving him up 12 spots from where he was to get him up into the top 40. And to be a top 40 player, you got to be a pretty damn good player. I mean, to be in front of the players that I listed, you have to be a pretty damn good player. So that's one of the biggest takeaways I have, is that Cade is getting national love at another level, and I don't think we can no longer say that he's not getting attention, he's not being properly rated. I think he's being given a lot of love this offseason and finally getting the attention he deserves. The next takeaway I had was, I'm sure a lot of Pistons fans would feel if Cade makes a jump to where he's a top 40 NBA player, the Pistons should be in a good spot to make the playoffs this season. If Cade's a top 40 player, why can't they make the play-in at least? And the reason that you should not feel that way is because if you looked at the rest of this list, you don't see a Detroit Piston on the list outside of Cade until you get to number 94, and they have Bojan Bogdanovic at number 94. Now, am I saying this Bleacher Report top 100 is set in stone? It's the Bible. You have to, everything they put right here is the exact ranking. It's absolutely correct. No. But it's pretty on point. I think it's a good reference point. And I don't think you can argue that the Pistons have any other top 100 players outside of those two. So that right there, yes. And that's why I've said on the podcast before that I think Cade can make a big jump and be a great player this offseason or this upcoming season. And the Pistons will still miss the play-in simply because their team is not that good. Now, later on in the next segment, we'll talk about why or what Jalen Duren and what Jaden Ivey can do to be a top 100 player next season. But I just want to give that perspective there, that extra, why won't the Pistons make the play-in if Cade's a top 40 player? Well, because he doesn't have another top 100 teammate on his team. Like that right there is the quick and easy reason why they won't make the play-in this year and why I don't believe they're going to make the play-in this year. The other takeaway I have is that I feel like the pressure on Cade this upcoming season is even more than it was on his rookie year. For some reason, when Cade was drafted first by the Pistons, his rookie season, it felt like no one was really paying attention to him at all. Like, usually when you're a first overall pick, there's so much attention on you. There's so many cameras on you. That, you get ESPN games simply because you're a number one overall pick. People are talking about you on ESPN. Is he a bust? Whether it's a good or bad thing, that you usually always talked about. Is he a bust? Is he a good player? Is he worthy? Has he been worthy of the first overall pick? Did they make a mistake at the first overall pick? Like, you see those topics talked about nonstop. I feel like almost every draft, instantly, all season long, you hear it talked about. But Cade's class, I don't feel like that was ever talked about. I never saw did they make the right decision at one? Is he so far a bust? Is he the good pick? Should this guy have went higher? Blah, blah. Like, I just didn't see any talk about their class really at all his entire rookie season. So I don't think there was much pressure on Cade his rookie year to be worthy of the first overall pick. Then the second season comes around, he gets hurt, misses the whole year. I think now his third season, he's actually finally getting like that pressure that normal first round picks get like immediately. And that's not me saying that Cade's been skating, getting away with no pressure. Yeah, I'm sure he has his own pressure, obviously, of wanting to be that number one overall pick. He has pressure from the Pistons community to be that savior, the front office to be that savior. I'm just talking nationally from the media. Look at every other draft. If you've been an NBA fan for a while, you know this is true. Almost every time a top pick happens, they're talked about a lot, whether it's a good or bad way. I don't think Cade has had that type of pressure outside of Detroit on him. If he doesn't perform this year, and I think he's going to, I think Cade's going to be absolutely awesome this year. But if he doesn't reach like top 40 status this year, there's going to be a lot of pressure on him. There's going to be a lot of talk about him. There's going to be a lot of negativity shot at him from outside Detroit. So, Pistons fans, you guys wanted Cade to be talked about. You wanted Cade to be in the eye of the storm. You wanted Cade to be the star of everything. I think you're about to get that this offseason, for good or for bad. I think he's going to be great. I think Cade's going to be awesome. But you're getting that because he's getting all the eyes on him. And now everything he does, I think this upcoming season is going to be hyper-analyzed. Like, I think when Cade has a bad game, it might get talked about nationally. Like, when he has a really tough game, when he has a spectacular game, it'll be talked about. Like, I now think that the normal coverage of a number one overall pick that we were all expecting right out the gate, you're going to get in his third season. He's going to be talked about a lot, whether it's good or bad. But Cade's awesome, so I expect it to be a lot of good. I expect him to really be one of I think Cade's going to eventually be at some point, whenever he hits his prime. It might even be this year if he really takes that big of a jump. But whenever he hits his prime, I expect Cade to be like an NBA fan favorite. Like, I expect a lot of people to really like Cade. He has a really cool personality, a really cool dude, very great. He's a great leader, says the right things, and just plays the right way on the basketball court. If he makes this jump to top 40 and a lot of people are talking about him, he's getting a lot of coverage, I think he's going to end up being one of those NBA fan favorites. And I think that's going to be super dope, too, for the Pistons fan base. But let me know what you guys think. What were your guys' takeaways from Cade being in the top 40? Do you think he should have been higher? Do you actually think he maybe should have been lower? Let me know what you think about all that in the comment section down below or over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. When we come back, I want to talk about what does Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren have to do to make this top 100 list next year, or to actually be a top 100 player this year if they're not already. We'll talk about that when we come back. But first, I've got to tell you guys about one of our sponsors, FanDuel. Get ready for the NFL season with incredible offers from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Plus, all customers who bet $5 will get $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Now is the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy to use. You can be on everything from the spreads to player props and more. And FanDuel has the Lions as slight favorites to win the NFC North. They also have them as slight favorites to make the playoffs. Are you as confident in the Lions as FanDuel is? If so, go over to FanDuel and take advantage of it. You can bet everything from Jared Goff's over on his passing yards. You can bet the over on Jahmyr Gibbs' rushing yards. You can bet the over on, or under, obviously, on Amon-Ra St. Brown's receptions within a game. You can do all of that at FanDuel. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season with an offer you won't want to miss. That's FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. And if you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you are listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. So I was scrolling through this top 100 list. I was looking, okay, I knew Cade was going to be on here because I already saw all the tweets. Was Bojan going to make it? And yeah, Bojan made it. He was at the back end, like we said earlier. He was at 94th. He was tied with Benedict Mathurin. I think he's the only tie on this list. I don't get how you can have a tie in this list, but whatever. But yeah, Bojan is at 94th. And then there's no other Detroit Piston on the list. There are some former Pistons I'm really happy about being on this list, like Bruce Brown, a favorite of mine, makes the top 100. Bruce is awesome. Always loved Bruce. But in the just missed the cut list, the honorable mentions, Bleacher Report has Jaden Ivey in the just missed honorable mentions. They do not have Jalen Duren in this list. So, first thing I want to say is I actually think, and this might be a hot take in the Pistons community. I might make people mad. I don't know. But I actually think Jalen Duren's closer to being top 100 player than Jaden Ivey is. I think they're both close. I think they're both going to be great. But I've slowly throughout the offseason, I think I've moved Jalen Duren ahead on my list because we'll talk about that in another episode. But as the season ended, I had Ivy over Duren, but I'm slowly like moving. Now I'm not getting lower on Ivy. I just think Duren. I think I might be a little bit higher on Duren now. But either way, that was my first takeaway, that they didn't even have Jalen Duren on the just missed the cut. Like he wasn't even thought about. I actually think Duren should have been on there over Ivy this upcoming season. That's okay. What do they need to do to secure a top 100 spot next offseason, one of these lists from Bleacher Report? And what do they need to do to actually be a top 100 player this upcoming season for the Pistons? And if they can be a top 100 player, and Cade actually is a top 40 player, this team could make the play-in. I think that's a big jump to have to take from everyone. But if they can all actually do that within the same season, they could make the play-in. They could do it. I don't know if they can. Again, Jalen Duren's 19 years old. Ivy's really young. Cade's coming off injury. And the rest of the team is really so young. So, again, it's hard for me to predict that because it's just they're years away from their prime. But anyways, let's just stay on the topic of what can they do to become top 100 players. So let's do Jaden Ivey first. What does Jaden Ivey need to do to be a top 100 player this upcoming season in the NBA? Well, I think by far, and so I want to say his defense. I think his defense is his biggest weak point. It's his biggest weakness by far. And if he were to become a fine defender, I think he would be a top 100. He could be a top 100 player. The problem with saying that is, I don't know if he's ever going to be a top 100 or not top 100. I don't know if he's ever going to be a good defender or a fine defender. So like me saying that would be like, in my expectation, I don't expect Ivy to ever be a fine defender. I'm going to be honest with you. So that would be like, oh, for a player we're going to talk about later, let's just say, well, if Hamidou can add a three-point shot, he'll be really good. Like, I don't expect that to ever happen. I don't think Ivy's ever going to be a fine defender. So he needs to get better in the defensive end. And if he were to do that, yes, I think he would be inching towards that top 100 spot. But I don't think that's realistic. I don't think that's going to happen his second season. I think there's a real conversation to be had that it may never happen for him for real. So what are some other things he can do to be a top 100 player? Well, one, continue to grow as an outside shooter. That would be another great way for him to reach top 100 status. Now, he was a 34.3% three-point shooter overall this past season, but we've talked about many times on the podcast about how good he was as an open catch-and-shoot three-point shooter. I believe he was in like the 88th percentile, one of the best open catch-and-shoot three-point shooters in the entire NBA. if he's able to add, or the Pistons use him in a way where he'll be not just catching shooting threes at a high level, he's moving off screens, he's catching shooting movement threes, he's hitting pull-up threes. If he's able to add that to his arsenal at a consistent, efficient rate, then it's going to be really tough to stop him. That's a great way for him to become a top 100 player. But if you want to be honest, probably even over the defense, he could probably get away with being a 34% three-point shooter. He can get away with not being a great or even a fine defender. If he becomes if he can become a really good finisher, like many people expected him to be coming into the NBA, he could probably be a top 100 player. Like that right there. The other ones are other routes, but him just becoming a good NBA finisher, that would like probably shoot him towards like 20 points a game. And he'd be much more efficient, and he'd probably be a top 100 player. Because that's right there is what was holding him back so bad his rookie season. That's what he struggled with actually the most, and it was actually shocking to see. He was one of the worst finishers in the entire NBA this past season. He ranked in the 9th percentile, according to Synergy, at the rim, efficiency-wise. So a guy that explosive, we talked about this a lot on the podcast, a guy that explosive, that gets to the rim as much as he does, as easy as he does, how many fouls he draws, if he's able to just become a good NBA finisher, get towards the 50th percentile, now all of a sudden we're talking about a dude who's, what was his true shooting this past season? You're looking at a dude with a 52.8 true shooting percentage. He becomes a good NBA finisher. Now you're talking about like a 55, 56 true shooting percentage. Like, I think that's probably the easiest route for him to get, and that's something he actually can do. I have the utmost confidence that Jaden Ivey is going to be a good finisher in the NBA. So if he can actually be a good one this upcoming season, he could be inching closer to 20 points per game, could be a top 100 player this season, along with all the other on-ball developments he made his rookie season. Just become a good finisher. The other stuff we can continue to work on, the defense, maybe some more variety to his three-point shooting, the offense can work in. Like all that other stuff, yeah, that would be great, but just become a good finisher, and that should be an easy route for Jaden Ivey. I think that could be a very easy route to him being a top 100 player this season. So let's move on to Jalen Duren now. What does Jalen Duren need to do to become a top 100 player this year? And this is why I think the reason why I have Jalen Duren ahead of Ivy on this, like if I were to put who's closer to making the top 100, I'd put Duren because I think he has the easiest route. Now, I know I just said that I thought Jaden Ivey becoming a good finisher is something I'm very confident in. I am. But I'm also just as confident, if not more confident, in what Jalen Duren can do to become a top 100 player at his position too. I think having Cade back is really going to help Jalen Duren. He's really going to be a highlight of the offense, of the defense, of the team in general, because he's going to be Cade Cunningham's partner in crime. And with how Cade likes to play, Jalen Duren may just feast just because of that. Just because of that. James Edwards III was on the podcast a few weeks ago. He said this exact same thing. Jalen Duren probably will have a better season than Jaden Ivey simply because of how Cade plays, who Cade is, and who he likes to run it with his Jalen Duren. So that's why I think Jalen Duren's closer, because of Cade Cunningham. If Jalen Duren's able to, he's going to be the starter. I think he's going to play 30-plus minutes. I think a double-double is pretty much automatic for him. I think there's no doubt in my mind that he's going to average a double-double this upcoming season for the Detroit Pistons. So, I mean, that's going to help him. How many people are going to be averaging double-doubles in the NBA? I mean, and how many of them won't be in the top 100? Like, very easy route right there. I think a double-double for him once he averages actual 30 minutes. Like this past season, he was only averaging 25, and he only started 30 games. When he's the full-time starter, playing 30-plus minutes, that's going to be easy. And I'd like to be told how many double-double guys were not in the top 100. So that's one reason why I think he's easily going to be a top 100 player. Secondly, he needs to make the jump defensively. Now, we saw flashes from him defensively this past season around the rim with the rim protection, but he's very raw still when it comes to defensive coverages like hedging, showing, drop coverage, switching. He's not consistent in any of those areas, and he still has a lot of work to do in those areas. Actually, if you want me to be honest, I was watching in some of the Team USA scrimmages with Cade and Duren, and then some of the Rico Hines footage that we were watching. Yes, I'm a weirdo for watching these clips and watching these games, these pickup games and all that, and actually like analyzing stuff. But one of the things that jumped out at me that Jalen Duren, yeah, he was doing really good. Cade, monster, all that stuff. Jalen Duren actually had a few possessions where he was like in drop coverage or whatever and kind of just got scored on because he just was in the wrong area. You still see, even in pickup runs, that he's not all the way there. The absolute, best at coverages defensively. So if he can make a jump in that department, he's going to be the anchor of the Pistons defense for years to come. Does that mean he's going to be the anchor at 19 years old? Probably not. Like that's why I'm saying that it's going to be hard for all these players to make these big jumps because they're so young. Can I sit here and say that Jalen Duren's going to make a Dwight Howard type of leap at 19 years old? It's rare. That doesn't happen. But if he can make that jump defensively, and he's averaging like 1.5 blocks a game, he's executing coverages, he's talking on defense, like all that stuff, along with him being a double-double machine, I just think it's going to be hard to keep him out of the top 100. And that's not even discussing the fact that he's going to be a DHO hub for the Pistons, I think. They're going to run a lot of offense through him because of his passing ability that is so rare at the big man position, or becoming, I guess it's becoming a little bit more popular at the big man position now as guys get more skillful. But still rare at that position, how good of a passer he is, how good of a screener he is, how good of a finisher he is. He tries to dunk everything around the rim, like all that stuff. I think Jalen Duren, if I had to pick between Ivy and Duren being a top 100 player this year, I think both of them are probably, if they do make the top 100 list, it'd be like towards the back end. I don't think any of them are going to be like top 50 players. The Pistons aren't going to have a big three already at 19, 20 years old. Like, that's not going to happen. But if I had to think either one of them are going to be like the back end of the top 100, I think it's going to be Jalen Duren. If I had to put my money on one, he's going to average a double-double. He's going to play a lot of minutes. He's going to be Cade's partner in crime, so his numbers are going to be even higher. I think it's easy. I think that's going to be an easy route for it. So let me know what you guys think. If you had to pick one of these two players, which one do you think is going to be a top 100 player this upcoming season? And what do you believe both of them have to do to be top 100 players for the Pistons this season? Let me know all that in the comment section down below or over on Twitter at Kukahill. When we come back, I want to talk about, is it shocking that Hamidou Diallo is still unsigned by the Detroit Pistons and just overall unsigned by the NBA? We'll talk about that when we come back. But first, you guys got to hear from some of our lovely sponsors. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. Hamidou Diallo, someone who became a Pistons fan base favorite this past season because of his energy, because of his athleticism, and because of how the fireball of energy that he is. Became a Pistons favorite this past season. He is still unsigned in the NBA. He is a free agent still. And he probably had, the craziest thing about it is, I think he probably had his best season of his career this past year. Now, I know there was another season where he averaged 11 points a game, but I don't think he was as effective those years. I think this past year for the Detroit Pistons was Hamidou Diallo's best year in the entire NBA. He is one of the best finishers in the entire NBA. When you take into account his size, the fact that he's basically a guard, with the sheer volume of attempts he takes at the rim, he's one of the best finishers, including big men, in the entire NBA. He's probably like in the top 5 percentile as finishers around the basket. Synergy had him ranked in the 82nd percentile. If you look at what he shot from 0 to 3 feet, he was like Giannis, like 75.3% basically at the rim, 0 to 3 feet from the rim. Really good finisher, fantastic finisher. And this past season, it seemed like that he had found, not only had he found, but the Pistons have found a way to use him to where he could actually try to be impactful. Not just a guy out there doing crazy stuff and, making plays on random bounces, being around loose balls and fast breaks, like all that stuff. It felt like this past season, the Pistons finally clicked with a way to use him, which is basically putting him in the dunker spot, treating him like a power forward, and having him be just a play finisher. If a guy, Jaden Ivey draws a double or he gets to the rim and he draws defensive attention, Hamidou Diallo is right there to finish the playoff with the dump-off pass, and he's going to dunk it. He's going to dunk it. He's going to finish it. He's going to draw a foul. Like, one of those things is going to happen. He's not going to miss. Like, it rarely ever happens that he's going to miss. He started cutting the basket more. He completely stopped taking threes. He was not on the perimeter at all. They started using him in, like, some screen and roll, where he would set the screen, he'd just roll to the basket, dive to the basket. If he was a little bit taller, he'd be a monster. He could basically play small ball 5 if he was taller, and he'd be a demon. He'd be unstoppable going around the rim. And I think he 100% would have been signed by now. The Pistons may have even re-signed him instantly if he was a little bit taller. Sadly, he isn't. He's a wing, kind of guard, kind of wing thing. And the reason or the way in which they found a way to make him impactful is also the reason why he's unsigned and why I'm not shocked he's unsigned. Because it takes such a unique situation, I think, to make a player like Hamidou Diallo actually impact your team, one, winning-wise, and two, worth it to have him on the squad. Because if you're not going to use him in that specific way, it's going to be hard to get impact from him. It's going to be hard for your offense to function with him. There's a difference. We talked about this, or I talked about this a lot pre-draft. When we were doing the scouting, and I was talking about Amen, and I was talking about the Pistons draft pick Asar before they drafted him. And I was telling you guys that, yes, do they struggle as three-point shooters right now? Yeah, but they're not non-shooters. There's a difference in NBA spacing. There's a difference on a basketball court from a guy who is a non-shooter, a guy who just won't shoot threes, and a guy who will shoot threes but just can't hit them at a high rate. There's a difference, and they draw different levels of spacing. They draw different levels of attention. A guy who just won't shoot the basketball, who just won't shoot threes. I mean, I think the easiest example will be like Ben Simmons, because he's like the laughing stock of fan base now, even though I think Ben Simmons has a chance to be really good this year. But Ben Simmons, like, for example, just won't shoot threes, and we saw how much of a problem that can be at some times. Draymond Green, for all the stuff he's great at, multiple times I see people talking about nationally, Warriors fans, Warriors content careers, Warriors beat writers. Like, I've seen people talk about nonstop how he's just went to just not shooting. He'll go multiple stretches where he just won't shoot, and it impacts spacing badly, and it impacts spacing in different ways than someone who is not a good shooter but will still shoot the ball. There's a difference, and Hamidou Diallo is one of those guys who just won't shoot. He just won't shoot the three, and it's almost like this is what I'm talking about. It's like a double-edged sword, because you don't want him shooting the three, because he's so bad at it. He's so bad at shooting threes. You don't want him shooting them. But then also, like I said, having someone on the court who is actually just a straight-up non-shooter is tough. It's tough, especially when it's not your 5. Like, you can get away with your 5 not being that guy who just won't shoot threes, because he's going to be the guy putting pressure on the rim, bringing gravity around the rim, and opening stuff up for other people. Like, that's okay. If he's not your 5, if you have a 5 who isn't a great three-point shooter, then you have another guy who just is a non-shooter, it's tough to make it work. It's absolutely tough to make it work. So, and then also, there's different opinions. People feel differently about his defense. I think he was better on defense this past year. I don't think he's as good on defense as Pistons fans try to make it out to be. I think when he locks in, he can be a fine defender, but I do not think he's some perimeter lockdown defender. I don't think he's some like all-NBA defender like some Pistons fans believe he is. I don't think that's the case either. And also, he's not a good decision maker either. He's not a good passer. This past year, he averaged just 1.0 assists to 1.3 turnovers. He averages more turnovers than assists because he's always just in an attack, score, dunk mode, which is what makes him good at what he does at finishing around the rim and what made him so good in that role. But again, if you're on a winning team, they're going to want somebody in that role who also can make the right decision out of it, who also, when defenses respect your ability to finish around the rim and attack the rim, you can make a play out of that. You can make the right pass out of that. You don't force every look you possibly get. So, yes, is Hamidou Diallo one of the best finishers in the entire NBA? 100%. He is quite literally, I think, probably top 5th percentile in finishing around the basket. He's a crazy, crazy finisher, dude. Absolutely amazing finisher. What else is he bringing? I don't know. I don't know. And the way to take advantage of a guy at his height and his position and what he's able to do, it's a little bit of a weird fit. It's a little bit of a weird like puzzle piece that if you can fit it with your team, it could be really helpful. but it's not many puzzles that piece fits on. So that's why I'm not shocked that Diallo has not been signed yet. Do I think he'll eventually be signed? Yes, I think he's an NBA player. He shouldn't be out the NBA. And there's a lot of guys, by the way, that are unsigned right now. Christian Wood, Kelly Oubre, guys who are NBA players who aren't signed right now. I think they'll all eventually be signed. I don't think Diallo is going to be out the NBA forever. I think he's going to eventually sign a contract. But I'm not shocked that Diallo's unsigned because of the reasons we listed. He's a non-shooter, not just a bad shooter. He's a non-shooter. He's not a good playmaker. He doesn't make the right decisions all the time. He's in constant attack mode that doesn't incorporate also making the right play when defenses respect the gravity he's making around the rim. And also, I just don't think he's as great on defense as Pistons fans think he is. So with all that, I'm not shocked that he's unsigned, but I do expect him to eventually be signed before the NBA season. He's an NBA player. But yeah, not shocked that he's unsigned right now. Are you guys shocked that Diallo continues to be unsigned in the NBA? Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below or over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. That's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. And until next time, I'll see you guys later. Stay safe. Until next time, peace out.